from members being sent away for life.
The Bandidos biker gang leader pled guilty to racketeering, drug trafficking, and extortion charges. He faces up to life in federal prison. Sergeant-at-Arms Justin Cole Forrester.
To the Department of Justice, drawing a clear red line for anyone who crossed it.
Criminal behavior like this has no place in America, and the Department of Justice is fully committed to bringing peace.
These are 12 biker enforcers, also known as the Sergeants-at-Arms, whose actions reshaped their clubs forever. Number 1. Sonny Barger. Barger Jr. was born in Modesto, California on October 8, 1938. Just after he was born, life would be cruel to him. 4 months later, his mother walked out, left him with an alcoholic father and strict Pentecostal grandmother. Barger never saw his mother again. With no one responsible for his upbringing, Barger was distracted in life. By age 10, he was fighting at school, assaulting teachers. He was frequently getting kicked out of class after class, and he was continuously ramping up his little crimes. At 16, he forged his birth certificate and joined the U.S. Army. He remained there for 14 months until they discovered the forgery and kicked him out. Drifting from one place to another, Barger returned to Oakland in 1956 and joined the Oakland Panthers, a small motorcycle club made up of veterans. Just after a year, the club dissolved. Then he met Don Boots Reeves. Boots seemed interesting to Barger, as he was a full-patched member of Hell's Angels MC. Now Barger had another mission in life, creating an Oakland chapter of Hell's Angels. On April 1, 1957, Barger and Boots founded the Oakland chapter of the Hell's Angels. They didn't even bother to take permission from the other California chapters, they just did it. And Oakland became ground zero for everything that followed. Barger had a vision, an organization instead of just a motorcycle club, so he began working on it. In 1966, he incorporated the Hell's Angels, filed paperwork, created bylaws, established a hierarchy with presidents, vice presidents, and enforcers. He turned a loose collection of California riding clubs into a structured entity with chapters across the country. This is also confirmed by Hunter S. Thompson, who spent a year with the Oakland Angels in the mid-1960s. He called Barger the maximum leader and wrote that he had a kind of wild animal cunning. Thompson also said Barger was one of the most intimidating men he'd ever met. But Barger's real genius wasn't intimidation, it was franchising. He created a model where chapters operated with autonomy but remained unified under the Oakland Mother Club. New chapters needed approval. The Death Head logo was controlled. Everyone wore the same patches. By the 1970s, the Hells Angels had expanded internationally. This brought some heat from law enforcement as well. June 13, 1979, Barger and 32 other Angels were indicted on RICO charges. The indictment included drug trafficking, racketeering, and conspiracy. The feds brought in 200 DEA and ATF agents for the arrests. Barger proved himself a genius in the courtroom as well and beat the RICO charges. He was acquitted of murder and racketeering. But in 1974, he was convicted of heroin trafficking and served 4 years. In 1988, he was convicted again of conspiracy to bomb the Outlaws clubhouse in Louisville, Kentucky. The bombing case involved an FBI informant named Tony "Taterhead" Tate, who happened to be a sergeant-at-arms from the Anchorage chapter. Tate recorded Barger at club meetings, made documented purchases of firearms and explosives, and infiltrated the highest levels of the organization. The strange thing was that Barger himself promoted Tate. He told Tate he represented the Hells Angel of the 90s. Clean-cut, articulate, capable. That promotion gave Tate access to everything. But even with Tate's testimony, Barger only served 3 years. He was released in 1992 and returned to Oakland to a homecoming party where Johnny Paycheck performed. Barger fought well wherever he went, but in 1982, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. His vocal cords were removed. For the rest of his life, he breathed through a plastic valve in his neck and covered it to speak in a raspy whisper. He stepped down as president in 1998 due to health issues. On June 29, 2022, Barger died at age 83 from liver cancer. His funeral drew 7,000 people to the Stockton 99 Speedway. Barger had served 13 years in prison total, But he'd built something that outlasted him. Because of Barger, the Hells Angels became the most recognized outlaw motorcycle club in the world. They expanded to over 30 countries, and it started with one man who understood that enforcement wasn't about muscle, it was about structure. Number 2. Walter Stadnik. Walter Stadnik joined the Hells Angels as a prospect in Montreal in 1982. He was sponsored by Yves Apache Buteau, president of the Laval chapter. Stadnik spent years as a prospect, running errands, guarding clubhouses, proving loyalty. Finally, in 1984, he was patched in. By then, things had changed drastically. Canada was in the middle of a biker war. The Hells Angels and the Outlaws had been fighting since 1977. Shootings in Montreal, bombings in Ontario. There, Stadnik saw an opportunity. Until now, the Hells Angels had chapters in Quebec and British Columbia. But Ontario, Canada's most populous province, remained fragmented. Dozens of small clubs were competing for territory there. Stadnik had a unique idea: unite the smaller clubs under the Angels. But he didn't want another war, so he used diplomacy. He traveled across Ontario, meeting with club presidents, convincing them with benefits like access to the Angels' drug networks, protection from rivals, shared intelligence. As a result, some clubs joined voluntarily, others did not. Around the same time in Quebec, the Angels were fighting the Rock Machine, a rival club that refused to submit. Between 1994 and 2002, the Quebec Biker War killed 162 people. Stadnik used to visit Montreal at least once a month during the war. He stayed at the heavily fortified clubhouse in Sorel, paranoid about being assassinated. But while Quebec burned, Stadnik focused on Ontario. He created puppet clubs, smaller gangs that did the Angels' dirty work without wearing the patch. This included the Rockers in Montreal, the Redliners in Winnipeg, and many others. This strategy made it almost impossible to tie Stadnik to any specific crimes. But the biggest event happened on December 29, 2000. Nearly 200 bikers from multiple Ontario clubs formally patched over in a single night. The Paradise Riders, the Spartans, smaller clubs across the province. In a matter of a few months, the Hells Angels went from a handful of Canadian chapters to over 30 nationwide. Stadnik had accomplished what seemed impossible, but law enforcement was watching. In early 2001, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, launched Operation Springtime, a coordinated crackdown involving multiple agencies. They used wiretaps, surveillance, and informants to build cases against the Angels' leadership. On March 28, 2001, over 2,000 officers raided clubhouses across Quebec and Ontario. They arrested 122 people, including Stadnik. He was charged with 13 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to kill. Stadnik proved equally good in court as well. He beat the murder charges. But to his bad luck, he was convicted of gangsterism and racketeering conspiracy in 2004 and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Stadnik built an empire through strategy, not violence. But the empire drew so much attention that law enforcement had no choice but to take it apart. Number 3. Harry Taco Bowman. Harry Joseph Bowman was born July 17, 1949, in Marysville, Michigan. He grew up on a farm in St. Clair Township and graduated from Port Huron Catholic High School. Teachers remembered him as tough but friendly. His nickname Taco came from his dark complexion. People thought he looked Hispanic. In the 1960s, Bowman joined the Devil's Disciples Motorcycle Club before finally patching over to the Outlaws. By 1984, he became international president for Outlaws. The Outlaws were one of the oldest motorcycle clubs in America, founded in 1935 outside Chicago. They had chapters in more than 30 U.S. cities and at least 20 chapters in 4 other countries. Bowman chose Detroit as his headquarters. He relocated the international headquarters there and conducted business from the heavily fortified clubhouse on Warren Avenue. But from the looks, Bowman didn't look like a stereotypical biker. He kept his hair neatly trimmed, stayed clean-shaven, and wore expensive suits. He lived in Grosse Pointe Farms, an affluent Detroit suburb, with his wife and 3 daughters. He sent his kids to private schools. He drove an armor-plated Cadillac and traveled with armed bodyguards. In the early 1990s, the Outlaws escalated their war with rival clubs. Bowman ordered a series of attacks that law enforcement described as audacious acts of violence. The most prominent one was on February 21, 1991. Warlock's New Smyrna Beach chapter president Raymond Bear Chaffin was shot 4 times in the neck and head while working on his Harley in his garage. His daughter found his body when she came home from school. The Warlocks had aligned with the Hells Angels in Florida. Bowman had personally ordered the hit. The rivalry did not stop there, as it seems like killing the chapter president was not enough. In 1994, the Warlocks clubhouse in Orlando was bombed by Outlaws. In 1995, Outlaws member Donald Fogg was found dead in the snow. Fogg had been shot in the head in a field near an Outlaws clubhouse. It seemed like the rivals had finally responded, but to the surprise of everyone, Fogg was killed on the orders of Bowman because Bowman believed Fogg was a snitch. Bowman later acknowledged that Fogg was the snitch he had targeted. Fogg, it turned out, had been talking to the police. Soon Bowman was caught up with law enforcement. In August 1997, Bowman was indicted in Tampa, Florida, on 10 federal charges, including RICO conspiracy, 3 murders, bombings, drug trafficking, extortion, and weapons violations. The FBI went to serve the indictment at Bowman's residence, but to everyone's surprise, he was gone. For the next 18 months, he was nowhere to be found. Bowman moved between safe houses across the country. Outlaws chapters hid him. His contacts in the Detroit Mafia provided support. On March 14, 1998, Bowman was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list as fugitive number 453. The reward for his capture was $50,000. He was profiled on America's Most Wanted. Despite his notoriety in biker circles, until now, Bowman had kept a low profile among the general public. Now his face was in every post office in America. But fate caught up to him on June 7, 1999. When Bowman visited his family in Sterling Heights, Michigan. The FBI was waiting. He was arrested without incident. His trial started in 2001. Bowman stood trial in Tampa. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: wiretaps, testimony from former Outlaws Vice President Wayne "Joe Black" Hicks, and documents seized from clubhouses. Bowman was convicted of racketeering, conspiracy to murder, drug trafficking, and firearms violations. He was sentenced to life in prison. On March 3, 2019, Bowman died in federal custody at age 69. He'd served 13 years as international president and built the Outlaws into one of the most feared clubs in America. But his reign of violence drew so much heat that it ultimately destroyed the organization's leadership. 4. John Satan Marin. It was the late 1960s when the Pagans motorcycle club began expanding north into central Pennsylvania. There, they ran into a problem. A rival was already waiting for them. It was the Sons of Satan, a local club with over 100 members who controlled the territory. Most clubs would have gone to war, fought for dominance, let bodies pile up until one side quit. But the Pagans' president, Fred Dutch Burhans, took a different approach. He met with the Sons of Satan's president, John Marin. They became friends, and Marin made a decision that changed both clubs forever. He patched over to the Pagans, brought several key members with him. The remaining Sons of Satan members were allowed to continue operating as a support club under Pagan supervision. This decision proved more beneficial to Maro. Within a few years, he was national president, and the Pagans exploded. Under Maron's leadership, the club grew from fewer than 50 members to nearly 5,000 by the mid-1970s. They expanded across new territories, which included the Mid-Atlantic region, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, New York. Besides the expansion, the Pagans also adopted a formal constitution. They formed a ruling council with 13 members. They paid their national president $100,000 a year, which was intentionally set the same salary as the U.S. president. They called it a show of class, but Maron's Pagans weren't classy anymore. Soon they developed ties to organized crime, especially La Cosa Nostra families in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New York. They started trafficking drugs on a massive scale. They also ran extortion rackets and prostitution rings. In no time, the Pagans became known for extreme violence. They were going heavy on their rivals as well. The extent of violence can be judged by events in the mid-1970s when Maron was involved in maiming and killing rival gang members. Finally, authorities caught up with him. He was prosecuted for the homicide of a rival gang leader. He was sentenced to prison. The details of his current status remain unclear, as records about whether he is alive, dead, free, or still imprisoned are not publicly available. Maron's imprisonment didn't destroy the Pagans. The structure he'd built was too strong. The club continued expanding. Today, the Sons of Satan still operate as a pagan support club. They wear a pea patch instead of the traditional 1% diamond, a symbol of their loyalty to the club. Number 5. George Wiegers. George Wiegers owned a Harley-Davidson shop and was a businessman. He was a long-standing member of Bandidos for 31 years until he became international president of the Bandidos in 1998. Under his leadership, the Bandidos expanded to 170 chapters in 14 countries with 2,400 members. And law enforcement noticed. Within a few years of his leadership, Bandidos were on the radar of law enforcement. After 2 years of investigation, in June 2005, federal agents arrested Wiegers along with 25 other Bandidos members and associates. They executed 19 search warrants. They found handguns and knives in properties owned by Wiegers. He was indicted on RICO conspiracy, conspiracy to murder, witness tampering, drug trafficking, extortion, and weapons violations. Wiegers faced life in prison, but he negotiated with authorities for lighter punishments. In May 2006, Wiegers pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to engage in racketeering. In his plea agreement, he admitted encouraging co-defendants to tamper with witnesses. The deal saved the government an expensive trial. In October 2006, Wiegers was sentenced to 20 months in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a $10,000 fine. He'd already served 15 months since his arrest. The plea agreement allowed him to attend Bandidos events after his release, but he couldn't live or work in Whatcom County or associate with any co-defendants. In court, Wiegers addressed the judge with his long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. "I'm very proud to be president of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club," he said. "I've been a member for 31 years. But he rejected the government's claims that the Bandidos were a criminal organization. His attorney argued Wiegers had tried to transform the Bandidos into a working man's club. Prosecutors disagreed. After his release, Wiegers returned to the Bandidos. But in 2010, he suffered spinal injuries in a motorcycle crash. And his career with Bandidos would end with this as well, because his successor would turn the tables on him. Jeffrey Pike, the new national president, revoked Wiegers' patches, alleging Wiegers had appeared in a documentary about the club. Pike's message was clear. "We don't do interviews. We don't do TV." Wiegers was out. The Bandidos had a new leader. 6. Jeffrey Pike. Jeffrey Pike became international president of the Bandidos in 2006. He was clean-cut and soft-spoken, and had looks similar to an accountant. But Pike's philosophy of power was different. You don't need to be the most violent guy in the room. You just need to be willing to order the violence. And he did the same on March 18, 2006. A rival Hell's Angel, Anthony Benesch, was shot and killed outside an Austin restaurant. Benesch had been trying to start a Texas chapter of the Hell's Angels. The Bandidos did warn him to stop, but he ignored them. So Pike ordered the hit. The murder sent a message to the rivals that Texas belonged to the Bandidos, and anyone who challenged the authority would meet the same fate. In 2013, Pike promoted a club member, John Xavier Portillo, to national vice president. Portillo was different from Pike as he believed in hands-on instead of ordering it. He was the kind of enforcer who pulled triggers himself. Together, they declared war on a rival, Cossacks MC. Cossacks was a smaller Texas-based motorcycle club. With the approval of Pike and Portillo, Bandidos across Texas committed violent attacks in Fort Worth, Gordon, Odessa, Port Aransas, and Crystal City. The war culminated on May 17, 2015, at a Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco, where 9 bikers died in the shootout. Most of them belonged to Cossacks. At least 20 were injured. Soon, the authorities cracked down on bikers and arrested 200 individuals. Pike and Portillo were not at the scene, but law enforcement started building a case against them. Finally, on January 6, 2016, federal agents raided Pike's home outside Conroe and Portillo's home in San Antonio. Both were arrested on RICO charges. The indictment included conspiracy to commit racketeering, murder in aid of racketeering, drug trafficking, and extortion. Prosecutors presented evidence linking Pike and Portillo to the Benish murder and attacks on Cossacks. After a 3-month trial, on May 17, 2018, the jury convicted both Pike and Portillo on all 13 counts. Soon, their fates were decided. On September 24, 2018, Portillo was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus 20 years. Just 2 days later, on September 26, 2018, Pike was sentenced to life in prison plus 10 years. Pike had led the Bandidos for over a decade. He'd built them into the mafia on 2 wheels. But his methods were too brutal, the violence too public, and it brought the entire weight of the federal government down on the club. Number 7. Reuben Doc Cavazos. Bikers come from different professions. Some are shop owners, mechanics, but we don't see many from healthcare. Reuben Cavazos was different. He was born in Northeast Los Angeles in 1956. He became a licensed radiologic technician and worked as a CAT scan technician at USC Medical Center. Despite his medical profession, he joined a Hispanic street gang named the Avenues. Because of his profession, his fellow gang members called him Doc. Eventually, Cavazos left the Avenues and prospected for the Mongols. He rose through the ranks quickly and became international president in 2005. Cavazos had a vision to transform the Mongols. He recruited heavily from his previous street gang, Avenues, and others like 18th Street and MS-13. He brought in members who'd never owned motorcycles. The strategy worked. The Mongols expanded rapidly, but it created problems. Many of the new recruits were criminals first, bikers second, and this drew heat from law enforcement. The new members didn't fit in properly. They didn't follow traditional biker protocols. Authorities were already working on Operation Black Rain to stop the street gang violence. On October 21, 2008, federal agents arrested Cavazos along with 79 other Mongols members in Operation Black Rain. The indictment was 177 pages. It had every charge in it, which included torture, drug trafficking, and credit card fraud. Prosecutors alleged Cavazos had brokered deals with the Mexican mafia over drug payments. The possible outcome was life in prison. Cavazos had very limited options left. In January 2009, 3 months after his arrest, Cavazos pleaded guilty to 1 count of racketeering conspiracy. He was one of the first to plead. The details of his plea agreement were sealed. His sentencing hearing was closed to the public. Even legal experts said it was highly unusual. On September 8, 2011, in a secret courtroom proceeding, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. His son and brother, who happened to be Mongols as well, received lighter sentences. The secrecy fueled speculation. Many believed Cavazos had cooperated with authorities, that he'd given up other Mongols to save himself. The club had already made a decision before the sentence was announced. On August 30, 2008, the Mongols had already voted Cavazos out of the club. His son and brother were expelled too. There were rumors of him being a rat. This is evident from the Mongols' website as well, which lists Cavazos under Outbad, a special category reserved for expelled members. In the biker world, there's no worse label than informant. Cavazos was released from prison and currently lives outside of the biker world. He maintains he never cooperated with authorities, though the sealed nature of his proceedings and reduced sentence continue to fuel speculation in the motorcycle club community. Cavazos also published an autobiography in 2008 called Honor Few, Fear None. The title became a bitter irony, because when it mattered most, Cavazos honored no one but himself. 8. Tony Tate. Anthony Tate was a bouncer at strip clubs in Anchorage, Alaska. He worked the door and was responsible for keeping the order. This position allowed him to be friends with the local Hells Angels who frequently visited the clubs. He had a stable job and no intention of joining a motorcycle club. But in 1983, on a dispute with two policemen, Tate joined the Anchorage chapter of the Hells Angels. But Tate's relationship with police was not new. He was already working as a part-time informant for the Anchorage Police Department. He even got promoted as an informant. The cops he was cooperating with had little experience handling informants, so they passed him to the FBI. FBI agent Tim McKinley saw potential in Tate. He had dealt drugs. He looked and acted like the perfect outlaw biker. McKinley turned Tate into what he called a walking electronics platform. Tate wore 2 wires to every meeting, one as backup in case the batteries failed. He had a bug in his pager. He recorded everything. Now, with Tate set up fully, the FBI started the operation called Operation Cactus. It ran from 1984 to 1987. McKinley kept the team small, 8 FBI agents and 2 ATF agents, because past investigations had been compromised by corruption. But the Hells Angels were already one step ahead of law enforcement. They always knew when they were under surveillance. They moved methamphetamine labs right before raids. Agent McKinley believed someone inside law enforcement was feeding them information. Tate posed himself as a drug dealer to Hells Angels, and it allowed him to rise quickly through the ranks. He became Sergeant-at-Arms of the Anchorage chapter. Then Sonny Barger promoted him to Sergeant-at-Arms for all West Coast chapters. Barger later wrote about Tate. Judging by the way he threw money around, I figured he dealt drugs or something. Tate met Barger numerous times. He visited nearly every Hells Angels chapter in the world. Tate was on FBI's payroll, and they paid him $4,000 per month. On August 17, 1986, Tate knew something. Tate attended a meeting at the Oakland clubhouse. Sonny Barger showed him files containing identification numbers and home addresses of outlaw leaders. But the origin of files is what made it strange. The files came from the El Paso Information Center, a law enforcement database. Only police officers were supposed to have access. Now, with the information supplied by someone within the police, Hells Angels were setting out targets in rival gangs. Before Hells Angels could go against Outlaws, on November 10, 1987, the FBI executed coordinated raids across Alaska, California, and 4 other states. 38 Hells Angels members were arrested on narcotics, weapons, explosives, and conspiracy charges. During Operation Cactus, Tate and undercover agents had purchased approximately $1.6 million worth of cocaine and methamphetamine, more than 20 pounds of explosives, 3 automatic weapons, and 2 silencers from Hells Angels. Now the Angels knew who among them was compromised. They immediately put a $1 million bounty on Tate's life. For his safety, Tate had to disappear into witness protection. Years later, he appeared in documentaries about the club, still using the alias Tony Truth. He defended his actions, saying he'd done what was necessary. But in the biker world, there's no redemption for informants. Tate's testimony led to convictions across multiple states. But Sonny Barger fought well in the court as well. He beat most of the charges. In 1988, Barger was convicted only of conspiracy to violate firearms and explosives laws in the Louisville bombing plot. He served 3.5 years. So far, the government had paid Tate $300,000 over 3 years to build an elaborate case against Sonny Barger. But Barger still walked away with minimal time. Milwaukee Jack Rozga. By the 2010s, the Outlaws had rebuilt. Harry Taco Bowman was dead. The old guard was gone. A new generation took over. Jack Rozga, known as Milwaukee Jack, rose to become national boss. He represented a different era of outlaw leadership, less flamboyant than Bowman, more cautious, but equally dangerous. Rozga understood that law enforcement had evolved. RICO statutes had destroyed previous generations of club leadership. Wiretaps were everywhere. Informants were common. so Rozga operated carefully. He insulated himself from direct criminal activity. He communicated through intermediaries. He avoided the mistakes that had put Bowman on the FBI's most wanted list. But careful doesn't mean clean. Under Rozga's leadership, the Outlaws continued their operations, drug trafficking, weapons dealing, violent enforcement of territory, but with a touch of smartness. But this did not deter the investigators in Virginia. They had been building a case for years. They used the same tools that had taken down previous generations: wiretaps, surveillance, confidential informants. They documented meetings, recorded conversations, built a network map of the Outlaws' command structure. Rozga and 22 other Outlaws members were charged with racketeering, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Rozga was convicted and sentenced to federal prison. His conviction marked another significant blow to the Outlaws' national leadership, continuing the pattern of high-ranking officers being systematically removed by federal prosecution. The case showed that even with a more cautious approach, the new generation of enforcers faced the same problem as the old. Federal law enforcement had unlimited resources and patience. They would watch, wait, build cases that took years, and eventually, they would strike. Rozga's indictment sent a message to other clubs. The era of high-profile public leadership was over. The FBI had learned how to dismantle these organizations systematically. They didn't need to catch leaders in the act. They just needed to prove the organization was a criminal enterprise, and that the leader directed it. 10. Ronald Wade. Some enforcers understood power through organization, others through strategy. Ron Gut. Wade understood it through pure, unfiltered brutality. He was a Hells Angels member who was a staunch believer of violence, and he spoke it fluently, and soon he would prove it. In 1998, 2 members of the Outcasts Motorcycle Club made a critical mistake. They disrespected the Hells Angels. The details of the offense don't matter. In the biker world, disrespect alone is enough. What happened next became one of the most notorious acts of violence in biker history. Ron and other Hells Angels members lured the 2 outcasts to a location where they'd be vulnerable. What followed wasn't just murder, it was ritual. The victims were killed with axes and metal bars. The murders served a specific purpose. They were meant to be discovered. It was a message to other clubs about what happens when you cross the Hells Angels. But law enforcement prosecuted Ron for these murders, and he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The ritualistic nature of the killing suggested planning and coordination. The case became a reference point in federal prosecutions. Prosecutors would cite it as evidence of the Hells Angels' willingness to commit extreme violence. Defense attorneys tried to distance their clients from it, arguing Wade was an aberration. But the truth was more complicated. Wade was an enforcer who took the role to its most extreme conclusion. 11. Christopher Dirty Cosimano and Michael Pumpkin Mencher. It was December 2017. Paul Anderson, Outlaws Cross Bayou chapter president, was traveling in his truck. He'd been in the club for years. He knew the risks, but he did not know he was being followed by rival gang 69ers members. 2 members of 69ers, Christopher Dirty Cosimano and Michael Pumpkin Mencher, were stalking Anderson. Cosimano and Mencher rode their motorcycles with their faces covered and license plates obscured. After following Anderson for miles, Cosimano and Mencher pulled alongside his truck and shot him repeatedly at the busy intersection of Suncoast Parkway and State Road 54 during rush hour. The method was execution-style murder. No ritual, no message, just elimination. It was the culmination of a months-long campaign of violence that began with the beating of 2 69ers and the theft of their cherished biker vests. Cosimano and Mencher were convicted of first-degree murder. Prosecutors presented evidence of planning, coordination, and execution. Both men were found guilty in a trial that centered on the December 2017 assassination of Paul Anderson, president of the Pasco County chapter of the rival Outlaws Motorcycle Club. The story of the feud and the resulting criminal cases against 5 69ers has been widely told. What made Cosimano and Mencher different from earlier generations wasn't their willingness to kill. It was their willingness to eliminate rivals in broad daylight, showing that modern biker violence had become more brazen and public than ever before. 12. Dennis Rooster Katona. The Pagans Motorcycle Club had maintained a stranglehold on the East Coast for decades. After John Satan Marin went to prison, the club continued to grow. They fought wars with the Hells Angels. They maintained relationships with organized crime families. They expanded their drug trafficking operations. Dennis Rooster Katona rose through the Pagans' ranks to become national president. He inherited an organization that was powerful but increasingly under federal scrutiny. Law enforcement had learned from past mistakes. They'd developed new tools for dismantling outlaw clubs. And the Pagans were a prime target. Katona represented the challenge facing all modern club presidents: how to maintain a criminal organization in an era of advanced surveillance, aggressive prosecution, and widespread cooperation from informants. The old model, where clubs operated semi-openly and law enforcement treated them as nuisances rather than organized crime syndicates, was gone. Under Katona's leadership, the Pagans adapted. They compartmentalized operations. They used encryption. They limited what was discussed at official meetings. But federal investigators were patient. They used wiretaps to capture conversations. They flipped members who faced long sentences. They built RICO cases that could take down entire leadership structures. The indictment included racketeering charges, the same charges that had destroyed leadership in the Hells Angels, Outlaws, and Bandidos. Prosecutors alleged that Katona had directed criminal activity including drug trafficking, assault, and extortion. That he'd used his position as national president to coordinate crimes across multiple states. Katona was arrested and convicted. His conviction was significant not because of its brutality or innovation, but because it represented the systematic dismantling of East Coast biker leadership. The Pagans had been one of the last major clubs to avoid federal prosecution of their top leadership. Katona's conviction showed that no club was immune. The case revealed the evolution of federal strategy. Rather than targeting individual crimes, prosecutors focused on the organizational structure. They argued that the clubs themselves were criminal enterprises, that holding a leadership position made you responsible for crimes committed by members, even if you didn't directly participate. This approach made being president or national officer extraordinarily risky. Katona's conviction sent shockwaves through the Pagans. Like other clubs before them, they faced a choice: disband, go underground, or continue operating knowing that federal prosecution was inevitable. Most chose to continue, because for true enforcers, the risk was part of the appeal. These 12 men turned a simple position into something else entirely. They didn't just enforce rules, they built empires. But every single one paid the price: prison, death, exile, betrayal. And if you think you know everything about how these clubs operate, you might be wrong. There are secrets about biker clubs that even hardcore fans don't know. We've covered them all in another video. Click on the next video to see how it unfolds.